Mr. Burgess for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Stupak. Today it does open our third hearing, and a very critical hearing, into this subcommittee's ongoing investigation into the tragic accident of the Deepwater Horizon explosion and oil spill, which continues 24 hours a day to wreak economic and environmental havoc on our Gulf Coast. This hearing provides the subcommittee with an important opportunity to directly question the man who ultimately leads BP, Mr. Tony Hayward, the company's chief executive officer. And BP's role has been central to the causes of the incident and to the response. Over the course of our inquiry to date, committee investigators working in a bipartisan fashion have conducted numerous interviews and briefings and reviewed tens of thousands of pages of documents. Our subcommittee staff has done an excellent job, and this subcommittee has been focused on gathering the facts rather than rushing to judgment. And from this intensive effort, we've begun to identify a number of serious questions about BP decision-making that led up to the disaster. Exploring these and related questions today will help us identify for Congress and identify for the country what went wrong on April 20th and the days thereafter. And while we are investigating, a picture of the chain of events leading to this incident is emerging. Mr. Chairman, you and Chairman Waxman recently outlined some critical questions that we hope Mr. Hayward will address. For example, you noted the investigation has identified questionable choices by BP engineers to use a particular well design over another one that would appear to have provided more built-in barriers to an uncontrolled gas discharge. There was the choice made by BP to move forward with what appears to be an inadequate cementing plan and the related failure, despite clear warnings, to test that the cement was properly set and in place. And it appears there may have been a rush to move off this well. Whether there may have been economic or other time or performance pressures, some combination thereof, it is not clear, but that clarity needs to emerge today. The questions arising from our investigation outline the central role in BP's decision-making appears to have had in this incident. We need to understand that decision-making, Mr. Hayward. What factors influenced it, whether the decisions reflected a management and an operational mindset that failed to maximize safety in a challenging deep-sea environment. It is important to note that the picture developing from this investigation is not one of technological limits in deep-sea drilling. The construction of an 18,000-foot well was not pushing the envelope of engineering know-how so far as we have identified, but the picture developing is one of unsafe industry practices, although clearer, more focused industry standards may be in order going forward. Available evidence suggests that the use of best industry practices would have resulted in more cautious designs and more testing, more safeguards, and ultimately no loss of control of the well. Rather, and quite clearly, the picture developing from our investigation is one of questionable decision-making by people charged with designing and successfully drilling, constructing, and controlling a well that was a mile underwater. It is a picture composed of a series of choices which, taken together, created an oil well particularly vulnerable to a blowout, and of all the people who may have been distracted, unaware, or resistant to recognizing the problems around them. Documents show that BP was prepared to run a test on the quality of the cement job, but chose not to. I can't understand why, given the history of this particular well with 4 previous well control incidents in the 2 months prior to April 20th. The rig personnel appear to have taken their eye off the ball. BP employees were the key decision makers. Certainly others, contractors, subcontractors, certainly federal regulators may have contributed to this incident. The role of the federal government especially, including the overall effectiveness of the response and the efforts to help those harmed by the incident, remains a critical piece that, Mr. Chairman, we must pursue at the level of this committee, and I'm still disappointed that we have not done that. But it is BP's decision-making about the well design, the cementing program, the preparation, the integrity tests, or the lack thereof, or just the general lack of curiosity as to why these would be necessary, the failure to follow best practices that our investigation to date is showing were critical factors in this incident. But this decision-making is difficult to square with the avowed priorities of BP's chief executive. Mr. Hayward, in an interview before you became chief executive, you described how the death of a worker in an operation that you were leading in Venezuela shaped your opinions. You said, And I'm quoting, "I went to the funeral to pay my respects. At the end of the service, his mother came up to me and beat me on the chest. 'Why did you let it happen?' she asked. It changed the way I think about safety. Leaders must make safety of all who work for them a priority." And quote, Mr. Hayward, I respectfully request that you answer this question in your opening statement. If not for me, then for the two ladies who testified before our committee on the field hearing who lost their husbands on the Deepwater Horizon. You've been chief executive since 2007. You said safety is your #1 priority, and you would focus like a laser beam on safety. As chief executive, one would expect your directives and priorities would be carried out by your employees. We have now learned from this investigation that BP employees made 5 critical decisions that may have contributed to well failure, where safety was traded off. In fact, it was not the priority. So today, will you assert before this subcommittee that all decisions by BP employees related to the Deepwater Horizon reflected your priority of safety first? Mr. Chairman, the disaster in the Gulf of Mexico shows the consequence of a series of unchecked bad decisions. We in Congress and the federal government must also be mindful of the consequences of bad decision making. At a field hearing last week in Chalmette, Louisiana, the subcommittee heard some of the administration's decisions are threatening the livelihoods of workers and families who depend upon the energy industry. We've killed half of their fishing with the Deepwater Horizon spill, and it looks like we're going to kill the other half of their economy with our moratorium. Our hearing today looks at the consequences of bad decisions and the lessons learned. May we have the wisdom and humility to take some of those lessons and apply them to ourselves. And I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess.